Worship guy forgot my table today. He's in big trouble. That'll be in our staff meeting notes. If you're new with us for the first time, thank you for visiting. We're so glad you're here. You should have gotten a communication packet thing on the way in. I would just we'd love to get a record of your visit. We'd love to have to know that you were here. Also, we take seriously prayer here at CityView. So if you have a thing going on in your heart, your life that we can pray about, please let us know. We will do that. Our elders pray. Our prayer team prays because that's their job. That's their team. Like, they're a prayer team, so they better be praying, or else they're not really a team. They're not fulfilling a purpose of any kind. So we would just love for you to share that with us so we can pray for you. And then another thing that we just mentioned, that Lindley just mentioned a second ago, is our one weekend that's happening next weekend. We're going to have a trunk or treat here that starts at 4:30. That'll be out here for the little kids. Have them dress up if they want. They don't have to dress up. We're going to have our life groups that are going to kind of sponsor some cars to give away a bunch of candy. It's going to be a great time. And then at 5:30 is when our little festivity thing in the gym is going to start. Jared Greer is an American Ninja Warrior, and he preached at our preteen camp, and so he's going to speak there, and then also do the obstacle course thing and all that stuff, and then let the kids play on it. Then the next day, on Sunday, we are going to have him. He's going to preach in here for us that day. And then afterwards, we're going to have a field day, and all of us get to play on the cool course. You do have to sign a waiver. That's going to be absolutely necessary because we're old and we get injured, just like last time. If you have your Bibles, we're going to go to Judges. We're going to go to Judges chapter 8. We've been looking at this guy named Gideon. You know him. You've heard of him. You know who he is. You know a lot about him, I'm sure. Last week 2 weeks ago, we looked at how they kind of found him in a hole. Like, God came to him. Jesus came to him literally right in here. He was in a hole hiding from the Midianites. He was just afraid. He was a coward. And we made this point, kind of a big point, where God doesn't call the courageous. He makes brave and courageous the ones that he calls. And so he calls Gideon out, and Gideon, he does this fleece test. God, if you're with me, if you're not with me, if you're with me, let it rain on this and nothing else. And then the next day he kind of reverses it. Let this be dry and that be wet. And he says, all right, I'm ready to do this thing. So the next week we looked at how he kind of drafted his army. He had 32,000 people. God said, that's too many people, so send home all the people who are afraid. So 22,000 people go away. He's got 10,000. You might be like, well, 10,000 brave people is better than 32,000 who are questionable. Well, then God says, let's go down to the river, and whoever laps the water like a dog, that's your army. If they pick it up in their hands and they lick it, whatever reason why, because they're weirdos, then those people are going to be your army, and that 300 is going to be who gets victory. And clearly you have 300 versus an army of what looked to be around 100,000 people. They're encamped around it, and Gideon is still afraid. I would be afraid. Would you be afraid? Absolutely, you'd be afraid. 300 versus 100,000? That does not sound like good odds to me. So God says, go down into the camp, go listen to hear what's going on, see what they're saying about you. And he hears this dream that's kind of gone viral throughout the camp. And it's gone viral throughout the camp. There's a loaf of bread that rolls down, and they say, surely that's Gideon and the army of God. And we said, who would want their mascot to be a biscuit? But that's what Gideon is. That Gideon is this biscuit who's coming down, and he's going to destroy them. So God in that little dream is kind of sliding Gideon. Just remember, you're just a biscuit, Gideon. And on the other side of it is you're going to get victory. They already know. So Gideon devised this plan. We're gonna shatter pots, and we're gonna have these lights. It's gonna look like there's hundreds of thousands of us surrounding them, and then they're gonna kill themselves. So what ends up happening is just that. He shatters these things. It sounds like a million swords hitting against each other, and then the Midianite army, they freak out and they start to kill one another, and then they start to run. And in one of the greatest military victories in the history of military victories, 300 people defeat 100,000 people, taking no casualties on their own. And so Gideon starts to get a little praise. He gets a little accolade. And as he gets this accolade, people start to think, oh man, Gideon's a great leader. He's a great leader. He's a great leader. And that's kind of when he starts to buy his own hype. Have you ever met somebody who kind of starts to buy their own hype? You know, it's not real, but they've just started to, kind of feel, I'm good. I'm great. And things just start to go sour. Gideon goes downhill. The whole country goes downhill. We're going to walk through it a little bit, and I'm going to show you Gideon. I'm going to show you his one of his sons, Jotham, one of his sons, Abimelech, and then we're gonna make some points, and we're gonna be done. Okay? If you have your Bibles, we're gonna be in Judges chapter 8, and I'm just gonna summarize this first part. What happens next is they win this victory, and as they win this victory, Ephraim, which is a big tribe, the biggest, wealthiest, richest tribe in Israel, comes and says, "Hey, Gideon, why didn't you invite us? We wanted to fight. We want to come at it. We want to get in the battle. We want to do things." And then another little town, this little town called Succoth. That's a real place. Succoth. And they sucketh. They're just as, that was a terrible joke. That was a dad joke right there. This little town, and what Gideon, you start to see kind of Gideon's frustration with them, but it's kind of devolution in character in the way that he deals with them. What's he do? Well, with Ephraim, what he does, they're rich and they're powerful, so he sucks up. With Succoth, they didn't help, so what does he do with them? Destroys them. Literally decimates the town. Decimates his own people. Destroys the area, destroys the whole thing, and that's what's going on with Gideon. Maybe the bigger point is that in either case, he didn't talk to God about what God would want done with either one of these places that didn't help. You start to see this guy who just kind of starts to wing it on his own. Somebody who used to be afraid in a hole, begging God for help. Desperate for him to be near, desperate for him to lead him, hopeful that God would do things through him. And now he's just, we need Ephraim still, so let's work with them, but let's destroy this little village who just made me angry. Look down in verse 22, you start to see a little bit more. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son, your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." And Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." So what God had told Israel for hundreds of years is, you're not going to have a king, I'm your king. You're not going to have a king, I'm your king. You're not going to have a king, I'm your king. So you don't need a king. But I'm going to raise up judges to help it as those are necessary. So God raises up judges, and we kind of sometimes we get a little off and we think somehow the judge is a kind of a king. That's not it. Don't get there. They're kind of more like a military ruler, kind of martial law for the moment, but they are not a king. So the people of Israel, though, come to Gideon and say, "We want to make you our king. We want to make you the king. Will you be our king? Please be our king, Gideon. Let's start a dynasty where you're the king, then your son, then your grandson, and you're going to rule over Israel, and you're going to help us grow and get stronger and get better." And he says no, which is a great response. That's exactly what he should say. That's exactly what he should say. But then he starts to do kind of some things that are a little questionable that look like a king. Verse 30. Now Gideon had 70 sons. That's a lot of kids. His own offspring, for he had many wives. Whew, that's a problem. One wife is hard. Am I right? Men, anything? My wife's in childcare today, so I'm free. She's teaching uptown, so I can say that until you tell her and she listens to the message, so don't do that. But he's got 70 sons, so that's a lot of kids. Many wives, problem. Verse 31. And his concubine, who's in Shechem, so not a wife, concubine. So he's got 70 wives to have 70 children with, probably like 10. And then he's got concubines on top of it, which is essentially mistresses. And one of them has a baby called, she bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. Real quick, names mean something in the Old Testament. When someone's named something, it matters. Like Joshua, you know the name Joshua. In Hebrew, it means Yahweh saves, and like the way that works out in Greek is it's equal to Jesus. It's like the same name. So Abimelech, his name means something, and you see who named him. Gideon named him. His name is Abimelech, and that means my dad is king. So, no, don't make me your king, but this son's name is my dad is king. Like, okay, this is how Gideon's going down. And then he does some other stuff that's kind of king-like, and Gideon said to them, let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil. So they had gone and destroyed Midian. They'd gotten all this gold, all this stuff, all these things. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. So they had all that stuff, and he says, give it to me. And Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city in Ophrah. And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. We were reading this with my kids the other day, and they keep asking the question, what is it? What does whore mean, Daddy? That's a good question that I did not answer. But you start to see these issues where he starts to collect taxes. Hey, give me your gold. We need this. And then he builds this ephod. Now, an ephod was this religious garment that only the Levites were supposed to wear at certain times. And so what he's starting to do is he's collecting taxes like a king, and then he's also starting to wear these religious vestiges and saying, come to me. Come to me. And everything that Gideon had been against before, where he had been this man who was humble, who when you look at, you see him as a coward. He's not brave, he's not strong, he's not tough. You see him that way, and now you see somebody different. This is a thing that really, it scares me a little bit, that this guy who has found some success. Well, we said it a couple weeks ago, that Christians, you're probably going to face two main tests in life. There's going to be two big ones. There's going to be little ones along the way, but the tests are going to be adversity and prosperity. And Christians, you're probably going to do okay dealing with the adversity side of it, because you're going to feel weakness. You're going to feel less than. You're going to feel like, I don't know if I can exactly handle this. I need God. God, I need you. And so when you're faced with adversity, when you're faced with problem, you're going to go to the Lord and you're going to say, all right, I need you, God. I need you, God. I need you, God. And you're going to pass that test of adversity. But one of the ones that we're going to struggle with most is prosperity. That when God does decide to bless you fiscally, with children, with stuff, with things, too easily, we run the other way. And we start to buy our own hype. We start to do what Gideon's doing here. And we forget. So I came up with about 5 different things I saw with Gideon here that I wanted to, maybe it's a test for how you're dealing with success. And by the way, we live in an area where there's a lot of success. Lots of people do well in their jobs around here. Lots of people have great families. Lots of people are doing really well. So maybe just five little things that might be indicators, maybe 5 lights on a dashboard that might go off that say, hey, here's some things where you may not be dealing with your success very well. First one, infrequent prayer. Gideon used to pray at first out of desperation all the time, and then he stopped. One of the ways that we struggle with dealing with success is our prayer life becomes a little stale. It stops being about, God, help, we need you so badly. We desperately are in need of your support. And it goes to, dear God, thank you for this food. Thank you for giving it to us. Amen. And then it goes to, we don't pray at all. And it goes from this prayer of desperation to something that we do out of duty, and then it becomes just a detail that we delete. If you find yourself, your prayer life is pretty stale, then maybe it's an indicator that you're not dealing with success the way you need to. Number two, maybe you're making Lone Ranger decisions. See, Gideon stops consulting other people along the way. What do I know about this? How do I deal with this? What do you think I should do, God? What do you think I should do, other elders? He stops consulting others along the way, and he just starts doing his own thing. This is a thing that pastors often struggle with, so this is why CityView Church has been set up with an elder team. At first we had a board from outside we had to consult all the time, and now we have an elder team that everyone on that team has a vote equal to mine. My vote is no more powerful than anyone else's vote on that team. And so if they want to vote me down, they can all vote me down. That's a definite possibility on anything that we would bring up. We have to have people that consult in our lives. It is a wise thing to have many counselors around you. It is a wise thing to be able to talk to other people and ask them questions, to say, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? And to bring out the truth of it. But if you are kind of getting drunk on your own success, then you're not likely to go to anybody for help, for wisdom. Number three, you start to see a lot of anger and resentment. When you receive challenge to yourself, you kind of push back the other way and say, no, I know better, you don't know. You get resentful when anyone challenges you. You get angry when anyone says, have you considered this? I do a little leadership coaching, and I'm coaching this guy who's in charge of a small nonprofit, and he's having a lot of trouble dealing with his board. He came from ministry world. He was a youth pastor, and now he's leading a Young Life branch. And as he's leading this Young Life branch, he's struggling hard to learn how to interface with the board. And the board has always just been a help. They're a bunch of business guys who love ministry and want to help him a lot, but he gets mad at them frequently and doesn't know how to interface and work back and forth with that group. And he takes their challenges and gets angry and resentful. So this week I had a great opportunity to challenge him from Judges. I said, don't be Gideon, man. Don't be Gideon. Because this is a problem. If you can't receive challenge and you can't receive questioning in the right spirit, in the right way, in the right attitude from that person towards you, then that's an issue. You're not dealing with your success well. Number four, maybe it's a material excess. That's what Gideon starts to do. He makes for himself this ephod is made out of gold, because what everybody needs is a sweet gold bathrobe, right? That's what he's doing. And I just want a gold bathrobe. Why not? This is my ephod. We start to care too much about our stuff. Now, I'm not a poverty guy. If you should, you don't need to be embarrassed about saving money, about investing money well, about taking care of things properly. You don't need to feel bad about that. However, if it becomes all that matters to you, then that becomes a big problem. If what you care about is stuff, that's sin. Number five, worrying about his name. Start to see this where Gideon's worried about his name and how great he is and how much he's considered and how much he's cared for and how much he's thought of. When you start to worry about your name all the time, what do people think of me? How is this going to happen? How's that going to happen? Then success has gotten to your head. You can't walk through a door. This verse has always when talking about these things, this verse has always haunted me. It's Proverbs 38:9. It won't be on the screen, but let me just share it with you. Listen to these words. It says, "Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God." And do you hear what he's saying there? Is don't make me super poor so that I'm destitute and can't handle. And don't make me super wealthy so that I have so much stuff that I just don't rely on you. Don't put me in either one of these camps. I'm saying instead, just let me walk with you. Because my desire isn't to be rich. My desire isn't to be wealthy. My desire is to be close. Let's go on. He has a son. His name's Abimelech. We said that. He says, "I want to be king like my dad." This is like the story of chapter 9. And so what he does is he kind of hires a bunch of guards that are going to work with him, kind of a gang that are going to be on his side. And so he's got this gang of people who are going to kind of be these marauders. And he goes to the elders of Israel and says, "I want to be king," and then that doesn't work out and right away. And so he goes and kills his other 69 brothers. So now he goes back to them and says, "How about now? Can I be king now?" And one of his brothers escapes. His name is Jotham. Jotham escapes because he's hiding in a closet. It kind of runs in the family. Gideon's hiding in a hole. Jotham's hiding in a closet. That's what's happening here. But Abimelech is this guy. "I want to be king. My dad is king, so I want to be king now." And there's this scandal where there's not supposed to be a king. And this whole thing happens in Shechem. And Shechem was this place where Abraham, you remember Abraham, the father of faith, he received the promise that said, "Hey, we're going to follow after you, God. We're going to do what you want, God. I'm going to take this promised land, God, just like you promised me. I'm going to receive it." And so right there at Shechem, get the picture of this. Abimelech is saying, "Make me king. I want to rule over Israel." God had said we won't have a king. God says no king here, no king in Israel, no king in Israel. And at the same place where God gave Israel the land, the promise to Abraham, is the same place where Abimelech is saying, "Make me king." A couple commentators I read had similar things to say. They said it would be like reinstituting Jim Crow in Montgomery, Alabama. Or restarting slavery in Gettysburg. It would be this kind of a situation that would just be the most deplorable action that could have happened. And that's what's happening right here. That's what's happening to these people. And Abimelech is just taking control of the country. So Jotham comes out of his closet. Not that way. And he goes to Israel's elders and he tells a parable. He talks about 4 different kinds of trees. He talks about an olive tree, and he talks about a fig tree. He talks about a grapevine. These are kind of symbols for Gideon's brothers who should have been in control. Maybe they should have taken leadership. Maybe they should have been in control. But what they really cared about was having money and stuff and being great. And then a tumbleweed. And the tumbleweed he compares to Abimelech. That he's just kind of a worthless guy. But you have decided to put this worthless guy, this brother-murdering guy, in charge of all of Israel. You've decided this, and it's going to come back on us. That's going to become a giant problem. You've put this person who doesn't deserve to be in charge in charge. You put this person who should not be leading, who has zero character. This person with zero character is now the one leading us. That's a problem. And Judges 9 just goes through this account of scandal and sabotage and mass murder during Abimelech's reign. See, what happens is Abimelech starts to murder his own people because he's trying to take control, and he can't get everybody to agree with him, so he just starts to kill them. And then Israel's elders rise up and say, "No more, we can't do this. This is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this." And he continues to do it. And so he starts going from town to town. And he forces people into their tower, and then he burns the tower. Like a great king does. And then they go to another town and there does the same thing again. And another town does the same thing again. But this time a woman who's at the top takes a kitchen appliance. It's a millstone, like a KitchenAid mixer, and drops it out the window. And it lands on his head. And it kills him. Well, it doesn't quite kill him. He's maimed pretty badly. He knows he's going down, so he asks his swordman to come alongside him and say, kill me so that I'm not another guy in this book that's going to be recorded who's killed by a woman. Please don't let that happen again. So his servant runs him through. And verse 56 and 57 of chapter 9 says this, thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads. And upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. That's Gideon's name. So I want to make 3 points, and then we're going to come back and look at chapter 10 really briefly. But as you see this thing, you kind of see this. God's coming back to judge what he said he was going to judge. So number 1, just write this down, is that God will judge evil. I know sometimes in this world it looks like God does not judge, that God will not judge, that God's going to allow the evil to continue. God, why don't you do something about this? Why don't you stop this? Why don't you quit this? Why are you allowing this? God, why? Maybe it's on an individual basis. Maybe it's something you're dealing with on a regular basis. Or maybe it's something that's on a macro level that you just see evil in this world. You look at the North Korean regime. You look at places like the former Soviet Union. You look at this, that's evil that's happened, genocide that's happened in this world, and you say, why, God? Why have you allowed the evil? God will judge evil. It may be slow, it may be subtle, but it will be sure. 2 Peter 3:8-9 says, don't overlook this one fact, beloved, that the Lord one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient towards you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. He's going to judge evil. He's going to judge sin. It's going to happen. In fact, the way that the story that's used to kind of emphasize that is the one of Noah. You know the story of Noah? Yes. 10 Commandments guy? Just kidding. Boat guy? My kids always try to trick me on that. Dad. How long did it take Moses to build the ark? Like, guys, I wrote that joke. I'm a pastor. I know the story. Noah's building a boat because Noah is supposed to save people. Whoever's going to repent, get on this boat and go. God told him to. Do you know how long it took for that boat to be built from the time God told it till the time the flood came? 100 years. 100 years. Now that's back when everybody's living to be like 600, 700, 800 years old. 100 years. So God says, all right, Noah, this is your job. You got to go take care of this. Go build this ark. And for 100 years, he endures the mockery of the people there. You seen Bruce Almighty? Anybody seen Bruce Almighty? That's a 100-year-old movie. 10 probably. And you're just enduring this during this moment that says, people are mocking me. People are mocking me. But God's judgment is sure. In fact, God makes these prophecies that this is going to happen, and one of the prophecies he ends up making that's kind of lesser known is Methuselah. Have you ever heard of Methuselah? In the Bible, oldest living person. Do you know what Methuselah means when we said everybody's name matters in the Bible? It means when he dies, it will come. The year, if you add up all the years and you look to all the years as to when Methuselah was born and to when this flood came, the flood came the year Methuselah died. God had made this promise even back when Methuselah was coming. He was going to judge wickedness. He was going to judge evil, and he was going to judge it through the flood. 900 years later, he makes the promise to Noah. 100 years later, it happens. Sometimes judgment comes slow. Sometimes it's very subtle, but it is always sure. God will judge the wicked. God will judge sin. God does judge that. That is what's going to happen. And here's the thing, it's not a happy subject to talk about. People would rather talk about hope and how God's always with us and all of those great things that are true. But here's the terrible thing, God judges sin. And God judges wickedness. God says it cannot exist, but he's patient. He's patient. He's giving you time to repent. But the idea is, don't see his patience as license. Number 2. God will judge evil. Number 2, understand something. The evil is in us. As you look at Judges, this is kind of the first story where the oppression, up until now, the oppression has been coming from outside. All these other countries are kind of coming on Israel. They're trying to take over Israel. They're trying to hurt Israel. They're doing everything they can to mess with Israel. And now, for the first time, the issue's happening where it's Abimelech who's fighting his own people. And the oppression isn't coming from outside, but it's coming from inside. Now, you could really look, if you really looked at the story of Israel throughout this entire time, you would see that, you know what, Israel's kind of always been their own problem. They've always kind of been their own mess. It's always been them that's caused their own issues. But now it's just becoming really, really obvious that it's them. When we started this, we said we really need to look at the book of Judges. We need to consider ourselves as Israel. That there are parts and pockets of us that need to be conquered. Parts and pockets of us that where sin rises up and need to be destroyed and decimated. And we really need to think of this as kind of ourselves, is that inside of each and every one of us is wickedness. Inside of each and every one of us, we are born with a proclivity to sin. We are born with sin within our hearts. I didn't teach my kids how to lie, they just knew, right? Who taught their kids how to lie? Glad you don't have. You don't teach your kids to lie. They just know how. You don't teach your kids to be disobedient, do you? They just know. They're super good at it too. Mine are so good at it. You don't teach your kids how to fight. They just know. My kids are really good at that. They're A+. They'll fight over nothing. That's how you know how good they are at it. The evil's in us. Gideon's self-centeredness and glory lust produced a son who murdered his brothers so he could be king. Shechem's disregard for God's commands and their self-interest led to them selecting an opportunistic man. And Abimelech backstabbed and led to his own downfall. These are just a few ways that God allowed sinful choices to play out in the lives of the people of Israel. They were their own problem. And so are we. You're your own biggest problem. You're your own biggest sin issue. I talk about this a lot from the book of Timothy, where Paul's talking to Timothy, and he just says, I'm the chief of sinners. Paul, who's the missionary who plants churches all over the globe, writes half the New Testament. That guy's the one who says, I'm the worst sinner. I'm the worst sinner. And it's a call for us to just say that don't point fingers around the room or around the world as to who's a worse sinner than you. Because in the depth of your heart, you know you're the worst sinner that you know. You know what's gone on in your heart, what's gone on in your mind, what you've done. You know intimately the wickedness that's inside of you. The evil's in us. The evil's in us. The evil's in me. And so we need something bigger. We can't save ourselves. We need a better and truer judge and king, number 3. I think a lot of times we come to God and we say things like, God, save us from the situation we're in. Help me with my marriage. It is falling apart. God, deliver me from this man, from this woman. Deliver me. Help me. Save me. Save me from the financial issue I'm in, the job problem I'm having. Deliver me, deliver me, deliver me. I mean, those might be real things that you need deliverance from. Might be real things that you need to be saved from. I don't want to lessen any of that. But what if the bigger thing is not that we need to be saved from a specific situation, but we need to be saved from the evil that's in our own hearts, from the selfishness that destroys? What if the bigger thing is that we need to be saved from what's the mess inside and not what's external happening to us? There's no doubt that the external happening to us is there. It's always going to be there. What if the bigger issue is what's going on the inside? That you need to be more conscious, more prayerful, more worried, more concerned about the evil that's in here rather than there. What if he answered all the prayers and gave us everything we wanted? We got all the money that we needed. Have you ever thought about this? I read this study just recently that people who drive luxury cars, so BMWs, Mercedes, Bentleys, et cetera, that they are 4 times less likely to stop at a crosswalk. I can confirm this week. I went on a bike ride for the first time since I was probably 13. 10 miles, I didn't fall. That was awesome. I was going across the street. I was less than a mile from home, and as I'm going across the street, lady in a sweet new Mercedes nearly nailed me. So I just stared her down the whole way. I don't think she knew what happened. Like I was somehow in her way. It's like, this is going to be a sermon illustration. Sometimes we hear that education is going to be the thing that fixes everything. I think education is important, and I think it can really help a lot of people. I think education is a good thing. It's a positive thing. But education doesn't solve anything. The most educated people in the world were Stalin and Lenin. You know what that led to? 20 million people killed in Russia. It didn't go so great. Education on its own isn't an answer. Maybe if we're just governed well, where everybody's treated equally. We've seen the way communism happens throughout the globe. You can look at oppressive regimes like North Korea and Cuba. You can see what happens as a result of if things are just governed right and everybody is treated equally. It just doesn't work. It destroys. Because it's not the external that's the problem. It's the internal. And it's the human heart that has to be changed, not the human action. We're always trying to solve symptoms. We're always trying to deal with the cold. We're trying to deal with the flu. We're trying to deal with whatever might be happening to fix the problem that we've got. Let's take the cold medicine to fix the sneezing. Let's take the Tamiflu to cut down the flu symptoms. Let's take the medicine to fix the symptom. But here's the thing. What if the symptom is just a symptom? We can't just mask it over and over and over again. You have to deal with the root cause. You have to deal with the root problem. And friend, like our root problem is our own heart. That your heart, what Jeremiah says, your heart's desperately wicked. Who can know it? You're in desperate need of a fix for that heart that's a mess. And you need a Savior. And there's only been one. His name is Jesus. It's who we sing about every Sunday. It's who we talk about every week. It's who you hear about constantly because we think that Jesus is the truer and better king, the answer to the broken heart that's in you. And it's only by trusting in him that you will ever know true and real salvation. It's only in understanding him that you are going to understand that the sin that's so present inside of me, that there's cure for that. And it's the salve that's applied by Jesus. I'm going to pray here in a second. As I pray, I'm going to ask if there's anybody in this house who doesn't know Jesus. And if you don't, I would just like to have a conversation with you. I'd invite you to come talk to our elders at the end. But I want you to know that there's an opportunity for you today to accept Jesus. That you could see the brokenness, the darkness in your own heart, that you would understand the goodness and trueness of Jesus Christ.